Very good morning to you. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio. 6 minutes to go until we are live in the House of Commons for PMQs Unpacked, as ever, joined by Tim Shipman, chief political commentator of the Sunday Times. And this week, Giles Coren joins us as well to go and give us his take on what is. I'm slightly nervous about it, but anyway, I'm sure it'll be fine. Giles, yeah, if we could, get the swear button ready, it'd be lovely. Before that, though, no swearing now. Lara Spirit's here, Times Red Box editor. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, tip top. What do we think might happen at PMQs today?
Well, it's a very different PMQs to last week when, of course, PMQs just preceded the autumn statement. So, of course, when Rishi Sunak stood to his feet, he was not by any means the main event of the day. And as expected, Keir Starmer went on something a bit more left field than you might have expected. We had that.
For those people who might have been halfway across the Atlantic without the internet, what did they talk about
You
last
didn't
week?
listen to Patrick and I on PMQs last week with Tim.
Just for other people, what were they talking about last week?
So Keir Starmer chose to speak about the NHS, but specifically about mental health services. He focused on young people's mental health services and the difficulties that people are facing getting appointments. That was something that I think tripped Rishi Sunak slightly up, because you could see him going in his folder to the general NHS section and reeling off statistics, as he usually does by way of his PMQs routine. But he didn't have much specifically on mental health actually to say in that PMQs session. So it was an interesting one. But as I say, Labour, I was speaking to somebody in Labour, they felt very comfortable going on that issue because they usually feel that PMQs is a good opportunity to go for these issues where you might not have a huge amount of attention on PMQs. You can test some lines, you can do something slightly different, because the autumn statement on that Wednesday was the main event, and Hunt obviously on his feet shortly after PMQ. So this week, very different, of course. PMQs is definitely the main order of play. Today, what will they go on? It's difficult to see Keir Starmer wanting to talk for all 6 questions on the Elgin marbles, but who knows?
Spare us. But what about... one of the striking things, actually, is given that the autumn statement was literally this time last week, it's sort of vanished from the political conversation. Whatever ups or downs or good news or bad news, it's just sort of been in... all that talk of it being another big staging post in Rishi Sunak's comeback, it's sort of just... sort of blown away in the wind. Yeah,
this is the interesting thing. And when I sat down to write Red Box this morning, I was thinking about this time last week when Rishi Sunak about to see his Chancellor announce tax cuts, but, those migration statistics still under wraps, they hadn't yet been published. I think since we saw those record migration stats the following day, that has been the main news story, certainly for Tory MPs since, and certainly when it comes to party management for Rishi Sunak. His MPs slightly buoyed for the immediate aftermath of that autumn statement by news of tax cuts, by the idea that you may see more to come from Hunt in the following months. But as soon as we saw those migration statistics, there was a huge amount of speculation about what the measures might be next. And partly because we haven't actually seen what that final package will look like, that is the speculation that continues, and that is the reason why MPs are talking about this more than, I would say, last week's autumn statement.
But just there's been some sort of development on the Telegraph story. The Culture Secretary, Lloyd... I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll try and get my head around that before we start talking about that on air. Tim Shipman's here. Tim, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Matthew.
We were just discussing the fact that I didn't really miss anything last week.
It was a slightly better outing for Keir Starmer than the week before, but no, it was not an epic for the ages.
But also the fact that this time last week was the autumn statement. And it sort of disappeared already under the weight of the Elgin marbles.
Yes, the Elgin marbles are always fascinating. I mean,
they're not, Tim.
The potential for humour is quite high there in this particular PMQs. If someone doesn't make a joke about losing marbles, I'll be slightly surprised. I'm not going to bet you another lunch on it, but you would think that sort of hackneyed parliamentary wagmasters would be working on...
Wagmasters. Yeah, you'd have thought they'd... Well, we can only hope that the joke-writing team in Keir Starmer's office have upped their game on the last 2 weeks.
From a fortnight ago particularly, which was pretty...
In fact, it was so bad 2 weeks ago, and Tim and I were so agog at how... with so many open goals, Keir Starmer mucked it up. Afterwards, Giles Coren emailed me and said how much he'd enjoyed our agogness, the awfulness of it. So as a result of that, he's coming in. So Ofcom, stand by your phones with all of your punishments and complaints ready. Giles Coren joins us live for PMQ's Unpacked in 1 minute's time. Lara, you're going to go and watch the best of the West.
I am. I'll be
so
back.
We don't have to. Anyone good on the list to keep an eye on?
Unfortunately, actually, Raymond Chishti, obviously once
No, then.
an
Former
aspiring
leadership
Tory leader.
contender.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah,
He shall be asking a question, and we look forward to it.
Very good. Lara will be back with the best of the West after 12:30. Get online now, though, to the YouTubes. Get on YouTube, search Times Radio. I'm doing it now. Look, get on YouTube, search Times Radio. And then, look, there we are. Well, there's a very nice picture of Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer and Giles Coren on there. Giles Coren is in. He's here. Are you ready? You ready?
I'm very excited. It's old times, back in the studio.
Back in the studio.
Wee and they all came flying back.
Right, very good. Up next, PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio.
On DAB digital radio, on the Times Radio app, and on your smart speaker. Politics from every angle. Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley. This is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQs Unpacked, but first a look at the headlines this lunchtime. Talks are ongoing regarding an extension to the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. A further 10 hostages are due to be released today, alongside 30 Palestinians from Israeli prisons. The value of social care, scientists and data should be better recognised following the COVID-19 pandemic, according to Professor Dame Jenny Harries, the former Deputy Chief Medical Officer for England. She's been speaking to the COVID inquiry. An inquest has found that 4 teenage boys whose bodies were found in North Wales last Tuesday in a car accident drowned after their car overturned. None of the teenagers' families attended the hearing. And 3 and 4 companies that make branded baked beans, mayonnaise, infant formula and pet food have increased their prices faster than their costs have gone up. The Competition and Markets Authority is planning a separate investigation of the baby formula market, where just 2 companies account for 85% of sales. We'll have more news in an hour's time, but now live on Times Radio and the Times Radio YouTube channel. It's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
Yeah, here we are then. Tim Shipman's the Sunday Times chief political commentator is here. Tim, how are you?
I'm very well indeed, and a little bit starstruck that Giles is joining us.
Oh, don't give it away. I was about to do a big build-up.
I'm sorry.
Sometimes it's just
Do you
Tim
not have
and
any
I here.
follow-through listeners of your own?
Sometimes it's just Tim and I here, and sometimes we have guests in. We had a former tennis player and coach to Andy Murray and Emma Raducanu, Mark Petchey, who watched Deputy PMQs with us, or as he put it...
Second seed in a wild card, maybe.
We had Peter Dixon from X Factor.
Handbags are out now.
We even had, in this very studio, Zippy from Rainbow.
They're just shouting at each other, aren't they? I mean, I think they should be polite like me.
And this week we are joined by actual Giles Coren.
I was going to pour scorn on that roster of people and go, how can I follow that? And then I remembered I heard the Zippy episode, and that was absolutely rocket fuel political broadcasting. That one was brilliant.
You are definitely the best guest since Zippy.
I'm starstruck. I'm not only starstruck, but relieved to see Tim. When you said you want to do PMQs next week, I thought he was on holiday or something, and I was going to have to explain what...
I'm not that daft.
Now, my wife has messaged me and made it very, very clear that I'm the third wheel in this particular enterprise today. So,
But the point is, you emailed me 2 weeks ago, so you were listening to the show.
I do listen to the show. I was saying to your producer, I know. I mean, sorry, that's awful. That's like when sort of, you know, when sort of Clint Eastwood goes on Jonathan Ross and says, I had to listen to the show. No, of course. I mean, I always listen to Times Radio, but Wednesday is key for me. Normally in the morning, I do Stig and As from a panel, and then I record my podcast, and then Wednesday's lunchtime. And I always travel off somewhere, and I always listen to this on the way. And it's everything I know about politics I've learned from this show. So I don't know what I've got to feed back, really.
But you were particularly taken a couple of weeks ago because it was particularly bad. Rishi Sunak was in so much trouble all over the place with the Suella Braverman stuff and the Rwanda business and all of that. And sort of Keir Starmer was just a bit rubbish.
It was when he
But we need to be
fluffed it.
careful because he's a close personal friend of yours, isn't he?
Very close personal friend of mine. He spoke my name in a sauna. My name has been spoken by the leader of the opposition while naked. I don't know if his knackers were out. I can't vouch.
So
But
you weren't there?
I was not there. I have a neighbour who is, he's a Jehovah's Witness, and he's not madly in touch with the world generally, so you'd have to not be. He doesn't know really what I do. And he said to me, I didn't know you were a restaurant critic. And I said, really? And he said, yes, I was in the sauna yesterday with a man who said he was Keir Starmer. And I thought, and then I realised he was. And he said, oh, you live in the same road as Giles Coren, the restaurant critic. So literally, my Jehovah's Witness neighbour in North London has only learnt what I do because Ghoulie to Ghoulie with Keir in the sauna on Highgate Road. Keir told him who I was. So, yeah, that's as close as it gets.
These are better Labour contacts than you and I, though, Tim.
Well, we're all working on that.
Very good. What do you think, Mike? What would you, if you were Keir Starmer today, what would you ask Rishi Sunak?
I'd ask him if he knew about Giles Coren, the restaurant critic, in the. Well, no, it's. I suppose immigration. Would he want to sort of paint him on, or the Elgin marbles, or whether he's managed to, he doesn't greet people for lunch. Nice that he's made it here.
Yeah. What do you think, Tim?
I mean, as I say, I think there's got to be some marbles. There's got to be some marbles into play today, hasn't there? Because it is odd what Sunak did. I mean, yes, everybody gets hoity-toity about the marbles. Some people care more than others. But to cancel an actual meeting with the Prime Minister, apparently to score a political point against Keir Starmer, it'll be interesting to see if Sunak trots out the line he used last week about, well, you're just doing pointless political point scoring, which is sort of why we're here on a Wednesday lunchtime, isn't it, really?
Also, I mean, in terms of if one of the big challenges of the leader of the opposition is making yourself look like a Prime Minister in waiting, which he doesn't score brilliantly well, Keir Starmer, on that, although he is better. Being the guy who meets other Prime Ministers when the actual Prime Minister doesn't meet other Prime Ministers,
it's sort of a gift, really, you would think.
I'm reminded as well, the marbles were a big thing with Neil Kinnock. I think I probably first heard about it in the 80s, never heard of the Elgin marbles. Kinnock made it a big thing, we've got to get the Elgin marbles back. And it was seen as a horribly lefty position then.
Because what did he said it was like a smile without a tooth, with a tooth missing? Is that what Kinnock said about it?
Oh, no, I didn't listen past the headline. I'm pretty impressed that I could remember back then. But yes, it does. It's been a sort of Labour in opposition thing forever.
I'm surprised the Tory right aren't embracing this. They could get the Greeks to pay for the new royal yacht and then put the marbles on the yacht and deliver them to Athens. That might be a way.
Quite heavy. You wouldn't get that in your luggage, would you? Have we got the marble sound effect just in case there are any marbles? Very good.
Amazing.
Very good.
I see what you did there.
And we've got Keir Starmer, marbles and Keir Starmer. What more do you want? And Giles Coren and Tim Shipman. Let's go live to the House of Commons then. We are live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel. This is question 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In an effort to hide from his failures, the Prime Minister spent this week arguing about an ancient relic that only a tiny minority of the British public have any interest in. Mr. Speaker, that's enough about the Tory party. In 2019, they all promised the country that they would control immigration, numbers will come down, the British people will be in control. How's it going?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me be crystal clear. The levels of migration are far too high, and I'm determined to bring them back down to sustainable levels. That's why we've asked the Migration Advisory Council to review certain elements of the system. We're reviewing those findings and we'll bring forward next steps. But earlier this year, we announced the toughest action ever taken to reduce legal migration. The effects of that action are yet to be felt. That will impact 150,000 student dependents, and forecasts show that migration is likely to drop as a result. But all we've heard up until this moment from the Honourable Gentleman on this topic is a secret backroom deal with the EU that would see an additional 100,000 migrants here every year.
So what do we think of that joke then?
Oh, he set it up nicely. I mean, it was a predictable joke.
I was excited. I thought this is yeah.
Who's the relic?
Who's it going to be?
Who's it going to be? And it must have been someone in the. You're waiting for a Norman Tebbit type. You want to
or David Cameron. There was a
yes.
David Cameron.
Yes.
Fussing about an old relic.
Yeah.
Dragging him back,
broken away from the Yeah.
Well, once again, a stand-up comedian and a hilarious columnist are funnier than the Labour Party's joke writers.
But the joke writer's even written something that's okay. Why, when he's about to deliver the line, does he throw in Mr. Speaker at the top? And even if he'd had a good gag, he's killed it with that.
Yeah.
But that's enough about.
But that's enough about is also such a. It's when someone goes at the end of a not very good joke.
But, it's like putting meanwhile in a news story to link the two unconnected parts of it together.
What my favourite for doing that was always elsewhere.
Elsewhere.
Here's some news, then elsewhere.
And you also have you practice the joke. Has he not? You know, William Hague always talks about that, practicing the joke again in front of a room. Has Keir done that joke? But enough about the Tory party in front of a room full of cronies who all laughed. It makes me angry that you've got that close to a joke and not worked on it better.
That said, all we said was they'd talk about the marbles and about immigration, and frankly, Giles and I have nailed it already, so
absolutely.
we might as well go home.
Well done.
You can do the rest of it on
Well,
your
Matt
own.
and I are having lunch, so we can't go home.
We
We've got
can't.
to get through somehow.
So he asks about. He points out that immigration is at a record high, and then Rishi Sunak says, "Yes, it is. It's really high. It's terrible business."
Well, not just that. He's going to be crystal clear about it, Matt.
He's going to be crystal clear.
Just as he's been crystal clear with his cabinet about what he's going to do about, illegal immigration. We're still waiting, aren't we? And that's the problem with all this. We're less than a year from a general election, and the people behind him are getting quite antsy about it. And frankly, this is always going to be difficult terrain for the Labour Party. Sunak's comeback is right. Labour opposes most of the tough measures that they have suggested, and the one time Starmer talked about doing something proactive, he then had to recant it, that the idea of doing some kind of deal with the EU. He withdrew from that a couple of days later because it was embarrassing to him. But the fact that Labour feels able to attack on immigration ought to tell the Tory party something.
And also, just explain what the secret deal with the EU is that he talked about in response, accusing Labour.
Labour's view seems to be that if you turn up and are nice to Brussels, that they will help you stop the flow of migrants through Europe to Britain's borders. Now, anyone who's paid close attention to this knows that a lot of other countries are taking in far more people than we are. So he sees some kind of Europe-wide deal, which is not inherently stupid as a way forward. But the Tories calculated that would lead to 130,000 extra people coming here. If there was some kind of distributional deal based on population, we would have to accept more people than we have been. And they said that's what it would mean. And Labour said, oh, no, we didn't mean that. So,
But even given that the legal migration is running it, net migration is what, 700 and, what was it last week, 65,000?
Something like that.
100,000 doesn't sound that many.
Well, except it gets you.
Well, it gets you even higher. It's very hard to start saying, well, your plan's going to mean even more people.
But again,
Sunak
uses this phrase, we need to get it back to sustainable levels. Now, previous Prime Ministers, when they were asked what that was, used to trot out this slightly silly tens of thousands line, which I think most economists say is nonsense. But it'd be interesting to know if Starmer pushes him on what he thinks a sustainable number is. Is it because pre-Brexit, it was about 250,000, I think. Yeah. Certainly it'd come under 300,000 a year. I think most members of the public, if asked, would say that was too high. They certainly think 700 plus is too high. So I don't know what Sunak thinks is sustainable.
Well, maybe we'll find out. Stand by with your marble sound effect. Any mention of Very good. We'll go back to the House of Commons. It's question 2 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, never mind the British Museum. It's the Prime Minister who's obviously lost his marbles. Mr. Speaker, the Greek Prime Minister came to London to meet him, a fellow NATO member, an economic ally, one of our most important partners in tackling illegal immigration. But instead of using that meeting to discuss those serious issues, he tried to humiliate him and cancelled at the last minute. Why such small politics, Prime Minister?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, of course, we're always happy to discuss important topics of substance with our allies, like tackling illegal migration or indeed strengthening our security. But when it was clear that the purpose of a meeting was not to discuss substantive issues for the future, but rather to grandstand and relitigate issues of the past, it wasn't appropriate. But furthermore, Furthermore, when specific commitments and specific assurances on that topic were made to this country and then were broken, it may seem alien to him, but my view is when people make commitments, they should keep them.
He sort of doubled down on his insult to the Greek Prime Minister, didn't he?
Yeah.
That was surprising.
Should we do? Sorry, I've just my bell's just been delivered.
You've needed your bell.
But let's start off first of all with the marbles joke. Was that was a better?
It was so bad it was almost good.
Yeah, there we are.
But it was a very dad joke delivery, wasn't it?
But maybe that's better. Maybe if it's too complicated, he mucks it up.
Yeah,
Just
I mean, it got sort of jeering
loss.
cheers, didn't it? There was some Labour people sort of semi-enjoying it and some Tories calling for more because it was poor. But, it was fine. It's better than it's better than mucking up a good joke at the start.
It does also, but it doesn't sound like the sort of thing that Keir would ever say. He's not a punmeister, is he? That's not what he would do with his conversation. I'm wondering if we were going to get all Greek to me, one of those ones. Or
We'll see. We'll write these down.
Do we get that?
What else do I have?
Some plate smashing, some calamari.
Plate smashing. Yeah. What else do the Greeks do?
Not a lot. I think that's why Rishi didn't bother to meet him.
I wonder if Rishi will respond with how dealing with immigration is it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Very good marathon, not a sprint. Now we've talked the past couple of weeks. I think the thing that prompted you to get in touch, Giles, was a couple of weeks ago we were saying how bad Keir Starmer's actual questions were, and his question there was, why such small politics?
Yeah. I mean, I think
that's not a question.
It's not much of a question, but I do think it plants the seed that this is a tiny little man that he's up against, and that kind of, I think sort of subtly suggesting that Sunak's a bit of a weed and a bit of a weakling and a bit sort of, he can do that politically by saying, the bloke couldn't even take a meeting with this fellow because he was frightened of being asked about some marbles. But on the other hand, one of the questions people ask me most when I'm sort of out there addressing different groups or whatever is, is he as small as he looks? Is he short? And I say, he's not short, he's just tiny. Everything's like shrunk. He's a very, very small human being, Rishi Sunak. And I think there's a slight sort of sense that people like their leaders to be 6'2" and have a bit of a jawline. And insofar as that matters, talking about small politics, I think, gets you there.
Speaking as a close personal friend of Keir, Keir is actually also small. And I, as a person of 5'9", I am there to police the barrier. I'm the person that you need to stand next to people, because if you're shorter than me, you're shorter than average. And if you're taller than me, you're taller than average. And Keir is definitely only 5'8", which same as Boris was, but he hasn't got quite such a small personality. And then Keir's got this massive head, which you feel that you could take the top off and lots of Rishis would climb out of it, which would be a very Greek... we've got a Greek thing, Medusa.
His head is a bit like he's already on Mount Rushmore, isn't it, Keir? There's a sort of slightly stone quality about that.
Mr. Whippy hair.
I tell you what I noticed, by the way, when it came to the immigration thing, that this is a bit of a political point for me to make, as if I were a genuine observer. He lacks Suella Braverman. When they bring up immigration, Suella Braverman... I can't remember whether you can say bat poo. You can say bat...
Yes, you can. Banny Ofcom is fine.
Whatever comes out of a bat. Braverman needs to have said something completely bat poo during the week for him to roll back on. If he hasn't got... She needs to have said, it's going to be zero. It's going to be zero, and it's going to be negative. We're going to start sending them home on Wednesday. And then anything that he says to track back looks like he's in control, doesn't it? He hasn't got that now.
And also, he hasn't got us sitting on the front bench nodding, which he used to do very enthusiastically, regardless of what's being said. Well, let's go back there, because we've only got through 2 questions so far. Let's do question number 3 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I discussed with the Greek Prime Minister the economy, security, immigration. I also told him we wouldn't change the law regarding the marbles. It's not that difficult, Prime Minister.
More marbles.
The reality is simple. He has no plan on boat crossings, and migration is at a record high. His policy is that companies can pay workers from abroad 20% less than British workers. That has contributed to those record high immigration levels, hasn't it?
Right, Mr. Speaker, he talks about the boat crossings. He's failed to notice illegal boat crossings are down by 1/3 this year, Mr. Speaker, thanks to every one of the actions that we've taken that he opposed every single time they were raised. But look, Mr. Speaker, no one will be surprised that he's backing an EU country over Britain. Just this last week he was asked which song best sums up the Labour Party. What did he come up with? Well, Mr. Speaker, he showed his true colours and chose Ode to Joy, literally the anthem of the European Union. And he will back Brussels over Britain every single time.
It's like gear change there.
A little bit of politics creeping in now.
A little bit of political point scoring. I mean, great, but first of all, a great moment for Keir Starmer just to be able to say, I discussed with the Greek Prime Minister the economy, security and immigration. You know, that, in terms of presenting himself as a Prime Minister in waiting, that's a great thing for him to be able to say.
It was, and it was kind of impressive. But he then got to the point of what the Greeks could afford to pay so-and-so, leading you to the what does a Grecian earn joke possibility. And he's missed it. So I'm just grieving for the absence of that.
And then a total gear change into he wrote back Britain. He's always more interested in EU countries, which reminds me of the fact he was on the radio at the weekend and said he liked Ode to Joy.
Yes. I mean, look, there will be parts of the country where that is not a bad attack line.
Yeah.
My sense listening to Rishi Sunak was that was no more authentic than Keir Starmer doing puns, to be perfectly honest. You hear when he does his sort of lines and he doesn't quite believe in them, that he'll sort of say the first one and then be straight into the second before he's even paused for breath. And it's just it's a sort of case of them tumbling out of his mouth because he knows they need to. And, you know, that whole stuff about it's down by a third. Great. But, you know, most of the Tory right thinks the public's not interested in the fact that it's come down by a third. They want it stopped. And boasting about how it's come down by a third just reminds people that there's still 2/3 of it sitting there. And he sort of seemed to me to sort of gabble his way through all of that in a way that made me think he wasn't wholly convinced by his own argument.
Patricia on the YouTube channel says, Ode to Joy does it for me. Does it do it for you, Giles?
Well, it's a very fine piece of music, isn't it?
Yes, it's fine. It's Beethoven, isn't it? I mean, they could have had a go at him for choosing a German, I suppose. He could have. Did they ask, what does Rishi kind of music?
I think they asked him for I think
Rishi likes Michael Bublé, so I'm not sure that Ode to Joy was the wrong answer.
But really, in the same way that Gordon Brown liked the Arctic Monkeys?
No, he really likes it.
Yeah. He's all Jimmy Cooper and Michael Bublé. He was asked what music sums up the Labour Party, and he said Ode to Joy, which you'd have thought that someone could have advised him not to say the one thing, which is the...
Yeah, I mean, it's a silly answer if you're the potentially incoming Prime Minister with a problem in Leave seats.
Yeah. Right, very good. Let's try and keep cracking on. This is question number 4 from Keir Starmer.
So let me get this straight. The Prime Minister is now saying that meeting the Prime Minister of Greece is somehow supporting the EU instead of discussing serious issues. He's just got dug further into that hole that he's made for himself. And ever, rather than deal with the facts, he's prosecuting his one-man war on reality. And that reality is stuck. Under this government, a bricklayer from overseas can be paid £2,500 less than somebody who's already here. A plasterer, £3,000 less. An engineer, £6,000 less. The list goes on. It's absurd. Labour would scrap his perverse wage-cutting policy. Why won't he?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we have taken significant measures and will bring forward more. And indeed, as the ONS themselves said, more recent estimates indicate a slowing of immigration as a result of the things that we're doing. But I am surprised, Mr. Speaker, to hear him now taking this new position, because I've got a quote here from a pushy young shadow immigration minister who said, and I directly quote this person, he told this House that limits on skilled migrants are, and I quote, a form of economic vandalism. Who could possibly have taken such a bizarre position to only then U-turn? It will come as no surprise to anybody that it was him.
Well, there we are. Somebody's been doing some research, and that was in March 2016 in a Westminster Hall debate, by the look of it, that Keir Starmer said that when he was a junior backbencher. Sort of junior frontbencher. He hadn't been in the Commons very long. So it's interesting. So this story that was on the front of the Times today about the call to close visa route for cheaper foreign staff, Labour have committed to scrap it. And so it's now at the point where if the Tories do end up scrapping it, as it looks like they might do, they're going to look like they're just following Labour's lead.
Yes, and Starmer will be able to claim that. But, you know, ultimately they're the government. If they do something, they're still, you know, the ones doing it, aren't they? I mean, really, we've reached a point, haven't we, where
Where would you normally be at this point, Giles, when you're on your strolling around, where the point where Tim and I even lose interest in what we're doing?
I would be
stretch of
texting
your
you
road?
saying, sharpen up, this is my main hour of radio of the week, Matt. I would be on the way to lunch and I'd be listening to this. And when I got in touch with you, I couldn't believe that in such a bad week for Rishi, Keir was landing nothing at all. And, I do like him. I've wanted the Prime Minister to be someone who lives within 3 streets of me now for 20 years. It was Jeremy Corbyn lived up the road. It was Macy with the 2 kitchens.
Ed
Miliband, there you go. He was up there. This now, finally, I want Keir in. I want him to land punches. I'm all right with. I'm here for one man war on reality.
Yeah.
That sounds like a sort
They
of Matrix
loved
7,
that,
doesn't
didn't
it?
they? Rachel Reeves thought that was very funny. She was
very
having a
funny.
good old
You
chuckle
need to
at
have
that.
Rishi in the big coat that that Neo wore in Matrix, and sort of, I think that's something.
Well, maybe if his trousers don't reach his shoes, his coat could.
A weeny little coat, a little Action Man Darth Vader coat.
Okay, what are we up to now? We've got 2 more to go, so let's try and fit them in. This is question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, there's only one party that's lost control of the borders, and they're sitting right there. And this is a government not just in turmoil, in open revolt. The Immigration Minister thinks the Prime Minister is failing because apparently nobody will listen to his secret plan. The former Home Secretary thinks he's failing because of his magical thinking. The current Home Secretary thinks he's failing. He even took time out of his busy schedule insulting people in the North East to admit he agrees with Labour. The Prime Minister seems to be the only person on the Tory benches without his own personal immigration plan. Clearly, his own side don't have any faith in him. Why should the public?
Mr. Speaker, it's really a bit rich to hear about this from someone who described all immigration law as racist, who literally said it was a mistake to control immigration. We have taken steps and we will take further steps, which is why recent estimates of immigration show that it's slowing. It's why next year the immigration health surcharge will increase by over 2/3. It's why immigration fees are going up by up to 35%. But Mr. Speaker, one of his own members of his front bench said that having a target isn't sensible. Right? It's no surprise, Mr. Speaker, to have people like this, because this is the person, Mr. Speaker, while we're taking all these measures that he imposed, this is the person who stood on a platform and promised to defend free movement.
Keir Starmer said there is a racist undercurrent which permeates all immigration law in 1988. Do you think everything that you've ever said, is there a statute of limitations, do you think, Giles?
I think in 1988 I was still saying vaguely palatable things. It's the stuff from 2012 and no, but holding into account the things that's ridiculous. That was the thing with Boris, which was there but for the grace of God with all of us, was things he'd said as a columnist when he was staring down the barrel of a deadline with something that he'd got to get a laugh out. So he said,
Please tell us you're not putting yourself forward for elective office at some point.
It's the main reason I can't. The main reason I can't.
Maybe you have a word with Keir. You could stand in Jeremy Corbyn's seat.
Do you think? Up in Archway? Yeah. I used to live 4 doors down from this harmless communist MP. I was in Whitehall Park. He doesn't live there now, so I was at 32 and I think he was at 38, and it was sort of funny that
was that the house where he always had the bin bags outside?
Yeah.
When he was leader of the Labour Party.
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah.
It was. No, I think with someone who was. I think if you're going to have rules of fairness, you'd say it can only be things you've said since you were an MP, since you sought office, I suppose. To go back to things that he said, the idea that he was ever a crazy shooting from the hip kind of verbal hooligan is ridiculous. He would have thought everything through even in 1988, wouldn't he? Also, I mean, it's possible, I don't know, because I don't know what he was talking about, but it's possible that there was something in 1988 which was bad, which he was talking about, but that's now been changed. That was, 35 years ago. Well, there's also... It is true. I mean, in any debate about immigration, immigration is to a degree about race. It is people of a different. I mean, sometimes it's just different nationality. There is an element of it, and the thing you have to be careful about when talking about immigration is careful not to be racist. But there's always, it's almost impossible to say there should be fewer people coming to these shores without sounding a bit racist. You could tackle it. Here's one other thing his actual question, Keir, was. why should the public trust you? Right? I'm having to write it on the desk.
You've written it on the desk
in Stabilo Boss because I didn't bring a pen. And the only other thing I found was somebody's lippy I found down there.
Oh yeah.
But
that?
I don't know.
Put that on. It'll look good with you.
Does it look nice? I don't know. There's not much of it left, so she's tossed it down there.
Right, very good.
But yeah, it was he said something about trust. Why should the British public trust you? And back in the day, when I was in the gallery, when I was doing the parliamentary sketch, when it was William Hague against Tony Blair, they used to answer each other's questions. I mean, they would tell all sorts of fibs, but that's surely a gimme. If he's just asking the Prime Minister, why should the British public trust you? He completely ignored. Why doesn't he tell him?
Yeah.
Isn't that an opportunity?
But also, it's a terrible when people say, "Oh, they never get an answer to the questions," because that's not a proper question.
No.
So don't be surprised if he just ignores it and goes off and does something else. Right, let's try and get question number 6 in there. There's the last one from Keir Starmer.
On their watch, migration has just trebled. And he's giving the House a lecture about targets. He's lost in La La Land. There could be few experiences more haunting for the members opposite than hearing this Prime Minister claim that he's going to sort out a problem. First, he said he'd get the NHS waiting list down. They went up. Unabashed by that, he said he'd get control of immigration. It's gone up. Following that experience, he turned his hand to bringing taxes down. And, would you believe it, the tax burden is now going to be higher than ever. It is ironic that he's suddenly taken such a keen interest in Greek culture when he's clearly become the man with the reverse Midas touch. Everything he touches turns to... maybe the Home Secretary could help me out here. Rubbish. So will the Prime Minister do the country a favour? We'll have to check the tape again, Mr.
Very
Speaker.
unhappy.
So will the Prime Minister do the country a favour, warn us what he's planning next, so we can prepare ourselves for the disaster that will inevitably follow?
Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of the year, we said, Mr. Speaker...
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of the year, we said we would halve inflation, and this government has delivered, easing the burden on the cost of living for families everywhere. But we know his plans, Mr. Speaker, all the way through that. What did he do? Back inflationary pay rises. He talked about welfare, no controls for welfare, and borrowing £28 billion a year that would just make the situation worse. He mentioned tax, Mr. Speaker. Just this past week, we've delivered the biggest tax cuts since the 1980s. For millions of people and businesses, increased pensions and benefits, and this week secured £30 billion of new investment for this country. So he can keep trying, Mr. Speaker, to talk...
Can I just say to the Shadow Foreign Secretary... Order! Just a little bit quieter, please. I want to hear. Right, Manchester.
What on earth happened there?
Oh, I don't know. He sort of cut him off just
while he
at
was
his
saying,
peroration.
While he was saying Britain isn't listening, they turned off his microphone because David Lammy was shouting.
And then instead of going back to Sunak, he seems to have just gone, I've had enough of this, sat down, and they called the great Raymond Chishti instead. Well, that was a better joke. There. That was a better joke, and it required a little bit of nimbleness, didn't it? He had to kind of tiptoe his way through that,
timing.
He said the reverse Midas touch was sort of okay, and then he said turns to, and you wonder, is he going to say turns to rubbish? And then the pause and perhaps the Home Secretary can help me out was
that was good.
Yeah, James cleverly looked very
much
cross
funnier
about
than
it.
the reverse Midas touch, which they all went, "Oh, this is amazing! Well, brilliant."
And then James cleverly started heckling him, and he said, "We'll have to check the tape again." I think.
Yes, exactly, and that was good. Bit of whether that was improv or not, I don't know.
So this is all to do with obviously whether or not James cleverly last week.
Well, last week was overheard on the microphone. The Labour Party took it that he was being rude about the constituency of the MP who'd been on his feet. Cleverly insists that it was the MP he was calling the S word rather than the constituency itself.
But it was the S word hole.
Yes,
he was calling it a S hole, and that's not a thing you ever call a person. Really, it's only a place, and it's this bizarre morality of Parliament where it's worse to insult
a place
than a person. which of course isn't true in law, in journalistic law. If you've said you can't libel a place, a constituency, but you can libel a person.
You can get dragged to Liverpool if you do it too badly, though, if as Boris Johnson discovered to his cost. I mean, I think just one other reflection on the last two. I mean, I think, yes, I think Starmer has clearly come out of this ahead. But I think the reason Sunak can bring up some of the stuff he's said in the past is because people still don't quite know what Starmer's actually going to do about all this stuff. What does he really think about immigration? Did he think that he thought that in 1988? What does he think now? Because, you know, they have opposed a lot of the stuff the government's been trying to do whilst trying to have a field day with the fact that the numbers are still very high. And, you know, the other question people tend to ask these days is, you know, they're all expecting Labour to win, but people aren't quite sure what Starmer's about still, particularly on an issue like this.
Having said that, his list of his sort of, you know, I don't want to worry you anyone, but Rishi Sunak's about to make something his priority. He made waiting lists going down a priority that went up. He said tackling immigration was a priority, that went up. He said getting taxes down was a priority, that's gone up. You know, that as a riff, you could see that in an election campaign ad.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to speak for him. He did have the inflation one, which suddenly became his main priority as soon as that went down. That was the only one that really mattered.
Which obviously, when it went up, was definitely nothing to do with him. That was all to do with international events.
Yeah.
Oh, so overall, who do we think won that?
Oh, I think Keir. I think my man from the sauna was all over it.
I mean, he won it so well. He's kicking back and in the sauna. The vision.
That's a mental image for you.
Exactly.
Right, you can try and wipe that for your minds. Up next, Lara Spirit is going to take us through the best of the West. We'll do that next on Times Radio.
Politics without the boring bits. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
'Twas the night before Christmas when all through our home, friends were waiting for drinks at the party we'd thrown. With an espresso martini mixer from Fever Tree, all you need to add is the vodka, you see. 5 espresso martinis ready in a second. A Christmas miracle, everybody reckoned. So this holiday season, mix with the best, with Fever Tree cocktails for you and your guests. Please enjoy responsibly.
Looking to grow your investments and generate a resilient income? The Scottish-American investment company, also known as Saints, could help. Saints has been investing for 150 years and looks for global companies that pay healthy dividends today, but also invest in their businesses to pay higher dividends in years to come. Saints is managed by Baillie Gifford, one of the UK's leading managers of investment trusts. Find out key information and more at baileygifford.com. As with any investment, capital is at risk and income is not guaranteed.
Get the big sporting news stories with Kate Borsay, Monday to Thursday at 9:45 p.m.
Times Radio with Matt Chorley.
A very good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio with a packed studio. Lara Spirit is here, Times Red Box editor, along with Giles Coren and Tim Shipman. Lara, overall, how were the best of the West?
They were pretty boring, and then at the end there was...
Lara, I've told you you're supposed to come in.
You have to listen to what I'm saying. Okay. At the end, there was a flurry of pretty interesting contributions.
Well done, very good,
very important contributions. We're going to go first to Tulip Sadiq, who asked a question that went on for a little bit longer than people in the House would have hoped, but which did get quite an interesting and robust answer from Rishi Sunak about this that explosive claim that he was comfortable with people dying during COVID. So take a listen to this.
Hiking parking charges on white van drivers and small businesses, and I join my honourable friend in urging the Labour on Westminster Council.
Apparently we thought it was going to be John Hayes, so we're just catching up now with Tulip Sadiq. Here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I quote, Rishi thinks, just let people die and that's okay. This was reportedly the view of the Prime Minister of COVID during late 2020, as recorded by the then Chief Scientific Advisor in his diary. This came to light last week in the COVID inquiry, and I was shocked that Downing Street didn't categorically deny it. So could I ask the Prime Minister today, how is it that people who were closest to this issue, who he worked with day in, day out, at the top of government, how on earth did these people get the impression that the Prime Minister was okay with people in our country dying.
Minister, I think he's got the question, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady knows, there is an ongoing inquiry into COVID, and it's right that process followed, and I look forward to providing my own evidence. But if she had taken the time to actually read the evidence submitted to the inquiry, she will have seen that the person she mentioned, the Chief Science Advisor, confirmed that he did not hear me say that, and that's because I didn't.
There we are.
Well, there we go. Finally, a denial.
Denial.
I mean, a lot of Tory advisors I know were banging their heads against walls about this, wondering what on earth Downing Street were up to, letting this story just run for 2 days. They said, oh, well, we've been told by the lawyers that we mustn't comment on the evidence as it happens. But if you can't deny that you wanted to kill people, what can you do in politics?
Yeah.
And it wasn't even it wasn't a direct quote. It was Vallance quoting something that Dominic Cummings had said to him, characterising the views of Rishi Sunak. And yeah, the fact that they were so flat-footed about it is pretty extraordinary. I've just had another message from one of the people who was moaning, going, finally, he's actually said, it wasn't me, Gov.
Is there a possibility that it was such a kind of cool and deadly thing that Rishi said? They wanted to give people 48 hours to imagine him being so kind of outspoken and murderous as to say something like that before go, no, he's the same boring bean counter you always thought he was.
Do you think he's going to take 2 days, if every question they ask him at the COVID inquiry, is going to take 2 days to come up with his answer?
We could be there for some time. I liked the way as well that he started his answer to that by saying the Honourable Lady knows that there's an inquiry. Yeah, yes, she does. She's just asked you about it.
At some length. Who are we going to next, Lara?
Now we're going to John Hayes.
Very good. Go back to John Hayes.
The Suella Whisperer, which is obviously not so much a useful catisation anymore.
Explain what you mean by Suella Whisperer for the benefit of...
So the until recently, for Home Secretary Suella Braverman was known to be close to John Hayes, who is a figure on the right of the party, one of the leading lights on the kind of the more right-wing proposals for stopping the boats. You'll be unsurprised to hear that he asked about this question today. Obviously, this is another area where MPs and indeed journalists were expecting something concrete from Rishi Sunak around not just Rwanda, but also around legal migration. Unsurprising that John Hayes makes this intervention today. So take a listen.
Sir John Hayes!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That 1.3 million migrants over a period of 2 years is a catastrophe for Britain is obvious to everyone apart from guilt-ridden bourgeois liberals and greed-driven globalists.
Yeah.
So, given that the same kind of people are stymieing the Prime Minister's Stop the Boats campaign, will he bring urgent measures forward to deal with legal migration? And in terms of the bill that he's promised, will he ensure it is exactly in the form recommended by his own immigration minister?
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to have the honourable gentleman's advice and support as in all our measures to tackle both legal and illegal migration. As I said, we are reviewing the recommendations of the MAC and will be bringing forward measures on top of the very significant restrictions that we've already announced on student dependence. And when it comes to stopping illegal migration, I've been crystal clear. We will bring forward legislation that makes it unequivocally the case that Rwanda is safe, and there will be no more ability of our domestic courts to block flights to Rwanda, and that's what our legislation will ensure.
I mean, saying John Hayes he's happy to have John Hayes' advice and support may have been the best joke of the entire PMQs, to be honest.
We had a double dose of crystal clear there as well.
There are something like 28 different backbench groups on the Tory right, and John Hayes is in charge of about 26 of them. So, that came with the full venom of the furies of the Tory right.
I'd never seen his face before.
John Hayes.
Yeah, it reminded me the famous Charlie Brooker line about Anne Widdecombe, that her mouth looked like a haunted cave in Poland. So he had an element of that, sort of trolls crawling about in it, didn't he? Just, sorry, superficial observation for you.
Which are you, Giles? Are you one of the guilt-ridden bourgeois liberals? Or one of
bourgeois. He said bourgeois, guilt-ridden bourgeois liberals. Yeah, I suppose I probably am one of them.
Yeah, quite right.
He also said a catastrophe. I noticed he's not a that haunted cave in Poland is spewing all sorts of news.
Turns out Rishi Sunak has used crystal clear 15 times in the House of Commons.
Just today?
No, that's why a double dose. The last time we had a double dose was the 13th of July. This is the sort of analysis you don't get anywhere else.
This is like Test Match Special.
Yeah, but with no cake.
You're the non-bearded wonder.
What are we? Your moustache, Giles, is that a Movember thing or just?
Or is it, or just you're a complete thing? Yeah. Do you know what it was?
Because a lot of people on YouTube are enjoying your moustache.
Are they?
Yeah.
Good. Well, it's. I was sort of. I'm going for a kind of desperate sort of Mexican sort of Narcos look.
Right.
Although I'm having a haircut on Friday, so I'll probably go a bit more Freddie Mercury then. But what happened was I was trimming my beard down about 3 weeks ago, and I'm always tempted to leave the moustache, and then I realised we were going into this Movember. Prostate awareness and all that kind of thing, very aware of mine. And I thought I'll trim it off and I'll leave it to grow longer and see if I can get some drama on the radio out of it.
Well, there we are. But if you want to see it, you've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left to go onto YouTube and see Giles's moustache. While they're doing that, Lara,
we have a really important question about hospitals
from
Ed Davey.
Ed Davey. Perfect. You know, leave them wanting more, Lara.
I actually think this is quite important. Obviously, it's a Conservative manifesto pledge. We've already had, damning reports from the National Audit Office making clear that this promise is probably not going to be realised before the next election. Nonetheless, the hospitals that Ed Davey highlights are interesting. At least one of them is in a constituency that the Lib Dems will be hoping to win in the next election. And I think you'll hear this again and again from the Lib Dems before we head to the polls.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 years ago, the government made a commitment to 40 new hospitals and significant upgrades to hospitals in most need. But today, many schemes are badly delayed. The Royal Berkshire, stuck at the development stage with not a single pound transferred for construction. Harrogate Hospital, still waiting on £20 million for urgent upgrades after RAC was discovered. And there are 25 more schemes, Mr. Speaker. So will the Prime Minister explain why his government is happy to let patients, doctors and nurses suffer for years in such unfit and unsafe conditions?
Mr. Speaker, we are delivering 40 hospitals by 2030. Good progress is already being made, and that programme is being backed by over £20 billion of investment. 3 schemes are already open, 2 are opening this year, and 16 are in construction or work has begun to prepare the site. It is absolutely right, though, within that we prioritise RAC hospitals as part of that. That required a reprioritisation, but that was the appropriate thing to do to ensure safety. But all patients and staff are already benefiting from some of the improvements that we've made, which comes on top of the largest capital programme for the NHS in its history, rolling out community diagnostic centres, urgent treatment centres and surgical hubs right across the country.
Sarah Dines. There we are.
So 3 hospitals.
Yes.
Of 40.
Out of 40.
And a reprioritisation because RAC was found in quite a few of them. So I think that's not a massively promising answer if they head into the election with that one. It might need some work.
But also, Tim, a reminder that the Lib Dems know where they want to win seats and will latch on to local issues in order to do that. And if they've got a target seat with a RAC-riddled hospital or a hospital that's not being rebuilt, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, home and hosed. You would think. I'm just sad that Raymond Shishti's question was obviously not interesting enough to take part in the best of the rest. We even heard him called.
It actually was quite an interesting question. It was about Islamophobia and how Rishi Sunak hadn't taken the action that he seemingly had promised Rishi some time ago. And
so you had that. You had that, and you still went for the Ed Davey question.
That is so nasty.
Well, the good news is 75 people have tuned into the YouTube on the property. It shot up. As a promise of seeing your moustache.
What else we promised to show them?
Get in that sauna.
Lots of people said they love the tash, Giles. There we are. Please ask Giles back. He is the missing marble. There we are. It was on the Thank you very much.
Yeah. They want to know about collar and cuffs, do they? They want to know if it's...
That's not. It was so close to getting to the end of this without getting into trouble. Giles, lovely to see you.
It was fantastic to be here, and we are going for lunch.
We are going for lunch
because you've shown this is like bring your son to work day. You've shown me all the glories, the wonders of Tim and Lara. What a thing! It's like zoo radio from the good old days. I'm taking lunch.
Well, they can. We all come. Are you coming?
I probably better do some work.
It is work. Don't say that. For 25 years, I've been saying, "I'm sorry, darling. I've now got to go to a seafood restaurant in Shoreditch." And then she goes, "Well, you have." No, it's work.
It's work. It's only Wednesday, Tim. You work on a Sunday paper. You don't
I know, but I've got to write for
days.
News Review this week, and they seem to have extraordinarily early deadlines.
But you only write 9,000 words for them. You can.
We'll help you write it. We'll help you out it. Come on, we'll all go.
It's a seafood restaurant. Oysters.
God,
it's
like
much
Chris
more
Evans
relevant
in the
than
90s, isn't it? Going straight out of the show. Right, lovely to see you, Giles. Lovely to see you, Lara. What time will you be in people's inboxes?
3 p.m.
3 o'clock. Time subscribers will get Lara doing PMQs Unpacked in your inbox, and Tim will be in your Sunday Times on Sunday. Fabulous. Up next, on the advice of Environment Minister Rebecca Powell, does speaking to your plants work? We'll find out next on Times Radio.
Kate Borsay, tonight from 8 on Times Radio.
We'll look at the latest from the COVID inquiries. Sajid Javid and Dominic Raab due to give evidence. With the truce extension in the Israel-Hamas war due to end early on Thursday morning, we'll look at the prospects of an extension. We'll also speak